Snow White had been living in peace 4 years, ruling her kingdom with kindness and fairness, but the shadow of her past was never far away. The people adored her, yet whispers of a new dark magic spreading across distant lands began to reach the castle. She often found herself looking out from the balcony, wondering if trouble would ever return. The dwarfs visited her often, bringing news from the outside world. Life was good, but Snow White sensed that change was on the horizon. Her heart told her that the next chapter of her story was about to unfold. One chilly morning, a mysterious messenger arrived at the palace gates, bearing a sealed letter. Snow White broke the wax stamp and read words that sent shivers through her body. An old kingdom, once allied with her father, had been cursed. Its people turned to stone. The letter begged for her help, claiming she was the only one with the heart pure enough to break the spell. She immediately thought of her late father's promise to protect their allies. Her instincts told her this was more than just a distant problem. Snow White called the dwarfs to the castle, explaining the situation in detail. They exchanged uneasy glances, recognizing that powerful magic must be at work. Grumpy was quick to warn her of the danger, while Doc tried to come up with a plan. They all agreed they couldn't turn their backs on innocent lives. Preparations began, with supplies packed and horses readied for a long journey. The once quiet kingdom suddenly buzzed with tension. The journey to the cursed land was filled with unexpected trials. Harsh winds tore through the forests, and strange animals watched them from the shadows. Along the way, Snow White comforted a lost child who had been separated from their family, showing the same compassion that had always defined her. The child's story hinted that the curse was spreading faster than anyone feared. Even the land itself seemed to be losing its color and warmth. They pressed on, driven by urgency. Upon reaching the cursed kingdom's border, they saw entire villages frozen in stone. Men, women, and children stood motionless, their faces locked in expressions of fear. Snow White's heart ached at the sight, and she placed her hand on one of the statues, feeling the cold creep into her own skin. The dwarfs urged her to move quickly, sensing danger nearby. It was clear that the magic was alive, watching them. The air was thick with a strange, humming energy. In the heart of the kingdom's ruins, they discovered a strange black mirror, standing tall amidst the rubble. Its surface shimmered like water, reflecting not just their images, but twisted, shadowy versions of themselves. Snow White realized this was the source of the curse. Memories of her stepmother's magic mirror flashed in her mind. But this one felt older, ancient, and vengeful. The dwarf suggested destroying it, yet Snow White hesitated, feeling it might hold deeper secrets. That night, while they camped, Snow White dreamed of a woman cloaked in silver, trapped inside the mirror. The woman whispered her name and begged for help, claiming she was the rightful queen of the cursed kingdom. When Snow White awoke, the dream felt too real to ignore. She wondered if the mirror was not just a prison for evil, but for someone unjustly bound. The thought filled her with determination to learn the truth. The next day, they ventured deeper into the cursed palace. Snow White found old diaries and letters hidden under dust and cobwebs, speaking of betrayal and a false sorcerer king who seized power. The woman in her dreams seemed to be the victim of his treachery. But each step closer to the truth made the shadows around them grow bolder. Whispers echoed through the halls, voices that weren't their own. The dwarfs drew their weapons, ready for whatever lurked nearby. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, a man with eyes like black glass. He claimed to be the Sorcerer King and mocked Snow White for meddling. His magic twisted the air, creating illusions of her deepest fears. She saw her friends turning against her, her kingdom burning, and herself alone in the forest once more. But she clung to the memory of her people's love and her father's courage. That strength kept her grounded. The battle that followed shook the palace. The dwarfs fought bravely, using their cunning to outsmart the sorcerer's illusions. Snow White realizing that brute force wouldn't be enough, spoke directly to the mirror. She called out to the woman inside, urging her to fight back from within. The mirror trembled, and a beam of light shot out, striking the sorcerer. His power faltered, revealing his true, withered form. With one final strike, the dwarf shattered. The mirror, instead of breaking into shards, it dissolved into a mist that swirled around them. The woman from Snow White's dreams stepped forward, freed at last. She thanked them with tears in her eyes, revealing that her magic had been used to fuel the curse. The land began to heal instantly, colors returning to the sky and warmth to the air. Statues cracked and came back to life, families embracing one another. Snow White stayed for several days, helping the people rebuild their homes. The freed queen offered her treasures and land as reward, but Snow White refused, saying that kindness should not be bought. She instead asked for an alliance between their kingdoms, ensuring they could protect each other in times of need. The two women shared a bond of mutual respect and strength, promising to remain friends. When it was finally time to return home, Snow White and the dwarfs were greeted with cheers at the palace gates. Her people listened intently as she told the story, proud of their queen's bravery. But in her heart, she knew that peace was never permanent. Somewhere, darkness always waited for its chance to rise again. She vowed to be ready when it did. Weeks later, a package arrived at the castle. No sender, no note. Inside was a small fragment of black glass, still shimmering faintly. Snow White's hand trembled as she held it, feeling the same strange energy. As before, the dwarfs warned her to destroy it, but she wasn't sure if that was the right choice. Perhaps it still held answers. She locked the fragment away in the royal vault, guarded by the strongest spells she could muster. At night, she sometimes thought she heard faint whispers coming from its direction. The voice sounded like the sorcerer's, but weaker, almost pleading. Snow White began to wonder if destroying the mirror had truly ended the curse, or merely changed its form. The dwarfs, sensing her unease, stayed close to the castle. They shared laughter and stories to keep the mood light, but in quiet moments, they too glanced toward the vault. Something about the air felt heavier, as if a storm was brewing. Snow White started studying ancient texts, hoping to understand the origins of such magic. One evening, as the sun set, she saw a raven land on her balcony, a black feathered bird with a shard of glass tied to its leg. The bird stared at her with unblinking eyes before flying away. Snow White untied the shard, recognizing it as another piece of the mirror. This could only mean that somewhere more fragments existed. Realizing the danger, Snow White made a decision. She would not wait for the darkness to come to her doorstep again. She and the dwarfs would set out once more, this time to hunt down and destroy every last remnant of the cursed mirror. It was the only way to ensure her kingdom's safety. The journey ahead would be longer and harder than anything they had faced before, but Snow White's resolve was stronger than ever. She knew the road would be filled with both danger and discovery, testing their courage and loyalty. And though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear: her story was far from over. As they left the castle under the first light of dawn, Snow White glanced back at her home, knowing she might not return for a long time. The air was cold, but her heart burned with determination. Somewhere out there, the shadows were waiting, but so was she.